Okay. Steve, this is the Global
Yes,
Digest think tank group. How can you say yourself?
I'm in the private sector. I am a security and safety consultant. I I I run a security and safety firm here in Abuja, Nigeria, and I do a lot of research. I do a lot of publications and all that. At the moment, I have about 3 publications that I have gone through peer review and about to publish. Educational research, academic research. One is on terrorism in the Sahel region. I did a comparative analysis of uh, types of government, be it military rule or democracy, right? Because if you look at the Sahel region, we have Burkina Faso, you have Mali,
Right.
Niger. These 3 countries currently are under the military rule. They are currently under the military rule. And the reasons they gave why they took over government, the military, was because of insecurity, particularly because of terrorism. And if you look at the last Global Terrorism Index of 2024 that was released in 2025, you will see that Burkina Faso is number 1 in the ranking, in the survey. Then Mali is around the 4th. Then you have Niger 5th, then Nigeria 6th. And these are 4 nations within the Sahel are within the first 6 out of a survey of 163 countries. So I tried to look at it and did a comparative analysis, looking at the military rule in these nations and comparing it with Nigeria that is under a democracy. What is it that they are doing different? And we are still having terrorism in the rise, the increase in these nations that are under the military rule, right? So summarily, I discovered that effectiveness or try to counter terrorism doesn't have to do with the type of government. It depends on how they want it combated or achieved, right? I did my PhD thesis on kidnapping for ransom in Nigeria. You discover that kidnapping is on the rise in Nigeria, especially for ransom. Nigerians pay heavily for ransom in Nigeria, just to see how to get their freedom from the hands of kidnappers. I did another publication on kidnapping for ransom and all that. So I do a lot of research, and I am happy to say that I also appear on national television in Nigeria to give my own expertise, opinion, or view about how to address security issues within Nigeria, Africa, and global.
Right.
So I work for myself. I have my firm. I'm a consultant of my firm, and I'm also a fellow of the Nigerian Army Resource Center. At the Army Resource Center, I deliver papers. I'm also a resource person. I deliver papers, lectures, bordering on security and safety.
You mentioned there were a lot of security, mostly terrorism in the sub-Sahara, and a lot of military dictatorship. And you want to say there was military dictatorship because of terrorism arising, or vice versa?
The point I think is that for government to get it right, be it democracy or military, there's need for governance presence, right? Because some of these rural communities that we have within the sub-Saharan region is that there's no government presence, right? The basic survival needs of man, food, shelter, clothing, and all that are not practiced, are vulnerable to for being attacked, right? Because there's no government presence, there's no security presence in these rural communities, in these countries that we are talking about. And what I am trying to say is that when you look at Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, there's high rate of poverty. There's high rate of underdevelopment. There's high rate of unemployment, and it's applicable to Nigeria as well. So the reason the military junta gave why they took over, the key reason was because of insecurity, and particularly because of the rise of terrorism in these countries. So if they took over government since 2021, 2022, 2021 in Mali, 2022 Burkina Faso, 2023 Niger, they took over from democracy. They toppled the democracy, right, in these countries, and they took over. So in the last 2, 3, 4 years, they've been governing or ruling the nations under military rule. What achievement have they made? They haven't made that remarkable achievement for us to see that terrorism has drastically reduced in these countries. And it's applicable to Nigeria as well. Nigeria is under a democracy, and as we speak, Boko Haram, ISWAP, and all that, they are also terrorizing Nigerians. If you look at it in the last in the last 1 year or so, terrorists now attack military bases. Military bases, that is where they attack. They try to see how to demoralize soldiers in Nigeria and also in these nations that I've mentioned. Since May, up to May this year, over 400 soldiers have been killed in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. If you come to Nigeria, since 2018 to date, we have lost close to 800 soldiers as a result of attacks from terrorists, right? So what I think should be done is that there's need for a community engagement, right? Because these rural communities where these terrorists go to attack, rural communities where they have military bases, they don't have presence. There's a lot that is not adding up. I think that for effective counter-terrorism measure, there's need for community engagement, because one of the military bases that was attacked in Maiduguri in Borno State, the terrorists came on foot. There's a lot that is missing. There's a lot of gap. There's lack of failure of intelligence, right? So there's a lot that we need to do as a government and as a people, right? So the point here is that we can counter terrorism within the Sahel, not necessarily the type of government that we are operating. That's the point. And the reason Burkina Faso and Mali took over government, it is not, for me, they are not achieving the desirable result, right? So now there's a lot that the government needs to do. I think that, for instance, 2 days ago, they had a military summit, a military event that about 53 nations were invited in Nigeria here from the other African countries. Burkina Faso and Mali did not send representative, right? They did not come, and they did not send representative for that military event, right? The Chief of Defense Staff of Nigeria hosted that event. So it goes to show our commitment. If there's disunity amongst nations.
You said some of countries did not want to present at the meeting. Nigeria, maybe they are most authoritarian country, dictator country, military government.
No, the countries, yeah. For instance, in Africa, some countries like Guinea, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, I think these very few are under authoritarian government, military. The rest are under democracy or monarchical, right? Where they have kings, right, ruling them, like Morocco and the rest. But here, when they came for the military summit 2 days ago, Burkina Faso and Mali did not attend at all, and they did not send representatives, right? So the point here is that we are talking about terrorism. Terrorism is a global phenomenon. It's an attack on a country, is an attack on other countries as well. Right. We are talking about coming together, fighting collectively, having that cooperation to see how to address this common enemy. But in this military summit that was hosted by the Chief of Defense Staff, Nigerian Chief of Defense Staff, Burkina Faso did not come. Mali did not come. So when there's that disunity amongst nations, when they fail to see how to come together, terrorists will now key into that gap, right? And you see that struggle or that fight, that regional security will not be there, because we need all hands to be on deck. We need that cooperation to be able to confront the common enemy, which is terrorism. Now, when it has to do with terrorism financing, in Nigeria here, I know it's a complex task. And of course, you know that terrorists use this finance to sustain themselves and also to expand their network. How do they get this finance? Most of them have gone into kidnapping for ransom. In the last 2-3 years in Nigeria, a lot of monies, over 2.2 trillion naira, was paid as ransom by Nigerians to terrorists, right? 2.2 trillion naira is not small money when converted to dollars. It's millions of dollars Nigerians paid, right? This is how they make this money to expand their network to sustain themselves. Formerly, they used to see how to have this bank transfer. Money is going to certain banks and other, but now they have discovered that if they use electronic transfer from one bank to another bank, that are trying their best in Nigeria to see how to identify illegitimate funds when they are transferred electronically. But right now, they are finding it difficult because these monies now are collected as ransom. You see communities, bandits go into communities, ask these communities to pay for their security. They levy communities that if you don't pay a certain amount of money to the tune of 50 million, 100 million, depending on the amount, these farming communities cannot even access their farms, right? So a whole lot is not working. And I think that all hands must be on deck. The government needs to sit down and see how to take politics, because politics is playing serious role in the fight against insecurity in Nigeria and in the African subcontinent here.
I see. So, as you said, the main reason the terrorists, they can get finance from ransom, and they are forced to collect money from the community, right? Ransom money. And then that's requires special police or special military to do counter-terrorism. They never capture any counter-terrorism operation that terrorist headquarters or terrorist mastermind leaders or any important thing. It is never successful counter-terrorism operation, or how can you analyze that?
I come from the private sector. So if a government or security agencies or agents, if they do well, we must commend them. Though it's their responsibility, it's their duty to provide security, right? Because that is the service they've been hired to render. Yes. In the last couple of days, weeks, months, the government and under the National Security Advisor and the service chiefs, they have made tremendous effort. If you go to the news, you discover that some terrorist commanders have been arrested, right? There's very recently 2 were arrested, and we have seen where some commanders were neutralized by the military, So I must commend them in that effort. But the problem is, I told you that most of this crime, most of these terrorist activities, most of these banditry activities happen in our rural communities where there's no government or security presence. Now, what effort is the government doing that we should have security presence in our rural communities to be able to confront these terrorists, to be able to confront these bandits that we have? We give them these names, terrorists, bandits. And for me, they are one and same. They are criminals. So we should treat them as criminals. A terrorist kidnaps in Nigeria, collects ransom. Bandits kidnaps in Nigeria, collect ransom. So, and all these are terrorist acts, right? So I think that what government should do is to see that there is presence of security in our rural communities. Now, the question is, do we have any security agency in Nigeria, for instance, or even in the West African sub-region like Burkina Faso and Mali and the likes, that have their presence in the rural communities, that when these criminals come, they can be able to confront them head on, proactive response. Most times we react after the damage is done, after they've caused these heinous or caused these violent attacks on our people. That is when we go to react. When we go to react, these terrorists or bandits have fled the scene, So which security organization do we have in Nigeria that can be found in our rural communities? When these people come, when these criminals come, they can be confronted frontally. We don't have any, right? Now, and that was why, before now, there's this organization in Nigeria. It's a local organization, a forest organization. It's called Nigerian Forest Security Service. Nigerian Forest Security Service. The bill to establish the Nigerian Forest Security Service passed the first, second, and third reading at the National Assembly in Nigeria here for it to be established by government, right? Now, the bill to establish this Nigerian Forest Security Service is before the president of Nigeria for his assent, for him to give them that power, that to legalize them, to institutionalize them, to become a security organization or institution in Nigeria, and for that security organization to be integrated into the formal security organizations that we have in Nigeria. Now, that bill is there before Mr. President, and Mr. President is taking his time to sign the bill. Now, how criminals, what the criminals do in our forest, how they hibernate in our forest. They have made our forest safe haven. They have found forest or made the forest a hideout. This is where they stay. They come out, carry out terrorist attacks on our people. They retreat back into the forest, regroup, and come out again and still carry out these acts of terrorism on our people. So there is need for us to have such an organization called the Nigerian Forest Security Service. Also in Burkina Faso, they also have such local structure. In Mali, in Niger, they also have such local structure, right? Now, what the government needs to do in these nations is to see how to formalize them, support them, right? Equip them. Because at this point, they will be first responders when it has to do with confronting this criminal. Because we cannot have the presence of soldiers or the police in every community in Nigeria. That's not possible. As I speak to you, we have well over 230 million Nigerians, right? And we have less than 400,000 police officers. The military, we have about 230,000 military. That's the Army, Air Force, Navy put together. And we're talking about Nigeria is a big country. So we don't have enough manpower. So there is need for me, I have said it time to time number, as an advocate of local policing, that we don't have presence of security in our rural communities where these forests are situated. So there's need for us to have a local structure, such as the Nigerian Forest Security Service, that will be there to support, to complement the effort of the conventional or formal security agencies that we have. So I want to advise the government of Nigeria and all these other nations within the ECOWAS sub-region to look in that direction. Because if we don't have presence of security in our rural communities, then this is how we'll keep carrying out this fight against insecurity without yielding the desired result.
Right. You rely mostly from government data, or how can you say, how did you collect that data? Collecting data also risky, right? Related to terrorism. It's very highly risky for collecting data.
Absolutely.
About terrorism.
Yeah.
So how did you?
Yeah.
How you did it?
Oh, okay. Research costs a lot of money. I've said it time to time number that fighting insecurity anywhere in the world is not cheap, and research also involves a lot of money. Right. And now, if you rely on government data, well, of course, you know that government data is not absolutely correct, because the government will give you data that will be in favor of the government, right? So there's need for you to go independently to see how to collect your own data. Now, for instance, let me tell you the way I collected data when I did my PhD thesis. I told you that I did my thesis on kidnapping for ransom in Nigeria. I know there are different types of kidnappings, but I focused on kidnapping for ransom because I was interested in the money, how they get the money, the medium or the means, how they get this money from victims and all that. And if they have sponsors, that was my area of focus. And I was able to interview 50 victims that were kidnapped and ransom was paid. If I tell you that I took the risk of going into a forest very close to Abuja, I took a risk that I did not take that risk again. I succeeded in having a conversation with some terrorists or kidnappers in a a particular forest, and I met some victims there. When I was coming in there, they were blindfolded. They blindfolded the victims that they had in their that they had hostage. Now, the point is, I collected my data from kidnappers themselves. I haven't interacted with those ones. When I saw that it was risky for me to go back, because I asked them that I needed to ask some more questions, but not with them this time, but with some other ones, they told me that they were more than this, but some of them had gone into the bush. You know, I don't know where they went to, but they told me some of them had gone into the bush. Now, when I returned, I had to go back to the police, and I asked them, the ones that they had in custody, kidnappers that they had in custody, that were given a, that it was on, that were that they hold, that are in custody, that they discovered that when they arrested them, they actually collected ransom from their victims, and they provided me information about the suspects that they had. And when I came, I interviewed those ones that they had in the police custody. Now, how did I get my data from victims? Police as well provided me information of victims that they came to report to the police that they were once kidnapped, and they paid certain amount of money as ransom. Now, beyond that, I visited some communities that were heavily under attack, that they were held hostage to pay ransom before they were allowed to go to visit their farms, to be able to have access to their farms. And I did some key informant interview on some persons that I feel that they had knowledge of the subject matter. And I did in-depth interview. Beyond doing in-depth interview, I also did focus group discussion, right, with members of these communities. As I'm talking to you, in the next 1 or 2 months or so, I should be headed to the northwest part of Nigeria that has to do with Sokoto, Zamfara, Kebbi, Katsina, where bandits are ravaging those communities as we are speaking. I am going to carry out a survey, a research on the banditry activities. Understanding the bandit world is a personal research that I want to carry out, right? So when I appear on certain forum like this, or some media houses in Nigeria, I become very emotional, because I interact with victims. I see what they have gone through. I see, but you see, my worry is that people in government, or the government, don't take their time to even visit these communities to see the extent or the damage that has been melted to them by these bandits. So they don't feel their pains. So somebody in government can decide to come on national television and say Nigeria is peaceful. Yes, in as much as Nigeria is peaceful, there are some persons, some citizens of this country, that the government has promised them their security, promised them their property will be their property and lives and all that. It's a constitutional thing for government to provide security for her citizens. Section 14(2)(b) of the Nigerian Constitution talks about the primary responsibility of government, which is security and welfare for the citizens of the country. Now, if you look at the numbers of persons or citizens that have been killed, citizens that cannot go from one point to another point freely, you discover that that section of the Constitution is not being fulfilled. Let me give you an instance. You can Google it after our conversation. The Yellow Water community is called Yellow Water community in Benue State. I come from Benue. Terrorists attacked this community some couple of months ago, and close to 200 persons were killed by these terrorists, right? They come with different arms, ammunition, machetes, and all that. They even came with fuel. When they come, they try to break your door. If they can't have access in breaking your door, they will now pour fuel on their buildings, and they will light it up. The moment they light it up, the people that are inside the building will now open the door to find their way out. As they are coming out, they're either shooting at them or they are macheting them with cutlasses and all that, right? And that is barbaric, it's inhuman, right? So what the approach from government and security agencies have said it is top to bottom approach. What I mean top to bottom approach is that when these things happen, when these violent attacks happen, that is when they deploy soldiers, deploy police to these communities. When the damage is done, by the time they get there, they will not see the perpetrators. It is only the victims that they will see, right? So how does that address the issue, right? And that is why I am advocating for a local structure, a local security structure that should be on ground in these various communities that will be armed, well armed to be able to confront these criminals when they come.
But it's very sensitive for collecting data from those related to the terrorism and those.
Absolutely. Let me just say, absolutely,
Yeah.
I agree with you. And sometimes this, when you want to get this information from the victims or members of these communities that have been attacked, for fear, because even if they give you this information, for instance, and these criminal elements now get hold or hear that a researcher or an expert or somebody came into the community and was able to extort some information from them, their life is at risk, right? Their life is at danger, because when they come to confront them, there won't be any security agent there or personnel that will be there to protect them, right? So they're even scared of giving out information about these criminal activities in their community.
Then you have a lot of data collection, and you have a lot of conversation, meeting with those the victim or victim related to the terrorism and ransom issue. It's sensitive. Nigeria police or Nigerian, your military has any inquiry to you about your activity, or they ever call you, or they ever uh, uh, talk to you, or they did anything on you, and how you have collaboration with Nigeria government, or especially police, or those are military for security reason, or is there any you have encounter with the security?
This part of the world, where Nigeria belongs, anything that has to do with expertise, intellectual, they don't take it serious. I'm sorry to say.
Right.
I have a very robust information about kidnappings for ransom in Nigeria and how do you operate. I've interacted with kidnappers themselves, and I've also interacted with victims for them to share their experience with me or experiences. I wrote a letter to the Office of the National Security Advisor that I introduced myself, research that I've carried out, and all that, especially bordering on kidnapping for ransom. I wrote letters to different government organizations, the military, the police. As I'm speaking to you, this is over a year gone. I haven't gotten a call, and my contact was in that letter. I haven't gotten a call from any of these organizations, military security organizations, say, come, Dr. Steve, we have your letter. Can you come and share more information with us about what you have said in the content of your letter? The governors of states in Nigeria, they are the chief security officers of their states, and their citizens are kidnapped almost on a daily basis in Nigeria. The governors of Nigeria, 36 states, they have an association or a body called the Nigerian Governors Forum. I wrote a letter to this very Nigerian Governors Forum. I addressed it to the chairman of the Governors Forum, who happens to be the governor of a state here in the North Central. As I'm talking to you, his state is under serious banditry attack as I'm talking to you. They kidnapped, like a week ago, they kidnapped somebody in his state. That's Kwara State. They kidnapped somebody in his state. When they negotiated with the person's family, they paid 30, they agreed on 30 million. Ransom bearers, 2 ransom bearers took the 30 million to go give to the kidnappers. When they got there, the kidnappers kidnapped the 2 ransom bearers. And they now started another round of negotiation, and they agreed for 45 million. So in all, to get the 3 of them released, both the primary adoptee and the 2 ransom bearers, the community and friends paid 75 million naira to kidnappers, right? So you see, when I'm talking about security, just the way I said in one of my remarks, I said we must be serious about addressing insecurity issues. We should take politics out of it completely, because these are distractions. we must have that political will to be able to confront this Hydra dreaded criminal activities that we are seeing that is confronting Nigeria today. How old is kidnapping? Kidnapping started barely about 15 years ago, right? So when we are confronted with these things are not new. We have our history, we have our experience, and we have our current realities, right? We should be able to see how to sit up to address these issues frontally, right? So we must have that commitment. All hands must be on deck to be able to address these issues that is confronting Nigeria and the ECOWAS sub-region.
Right. Yours is more related to maybe international terrorism or cross-border terrorism. It will be more, I think, impact on your national security as well, because just not simply domestic issue. If they are involved by counter-terrorism from cross-border. Dr. Steve, thank you for discussion.